Bring in Glenn Ignazio, as retired U.S. Air Force Special Operations Commander. Where does it feel like all of this is going to you, Glenn? Like when I woke up this morning, I saw Robert talking about oil. Oil was spiking, and sometimes that's a good tell that, you know, at least market participants are taking all this serious and think that something is coming. Are they right?
Yeah, I think we're right on the edge of something. I mean, one of the things that we were seeing is a little bit of a transition where before it was we are going to come to the aid of the protesters, and now we're into negotiations about more on the nuclear side. But we do have to be concerned because a lot of times exercises are sort of a nice sort of cover that something's going to happen. We've always seen that Iran is always positioned about possibly mining the Straits of Hormuz, and their tactics are with small boats and really a swarm mass that could go against the U.S. Navy. So I think we're on the edge of something happening either between Iran and ourselves, but who's going to kick it off first is the question.
What would that something look like with this kind of armada of ships that the president is sending in that direction? You know, there was some pushback from the real hardliners at first, said, well, you know, Trump, he's not going in, he's leaving the protesters there, he's leaving them, you know, hanging them out to dry. But perhaps it was just he needed to move some assets to the region. What do you make of the assets that are headed that way?
Yeah, two things. Well, first of all, putting that much force there is definitely an intimidation as far as what we're able to carry out. Where before we used some more of the allies when we defended Israel, now we're going to put our own forces in there, which gives us the ability to operate autonomously, as we've seen UAE and Saudi back about supporting us if we do anything in Iran. Additionally, as we talked about last week, the longer that this goes, the detriment to the protesters, because of course we see the slam down from Iran. But again, we're looking at this that we would probably hit IRGC and other events like that, or Iran trying to do something preemptively, which is really the only thing that would benefit them. Unfortunately, they're going to have the wrath of the American Navy after that. So that's where I see where things are right now.
Let me switch things, speaking of where the assets of the American Navy had been, to Venezuela for a moment and talk a little bit about, first of all, what President Trump and his administration did yesterday. There was this tanker that was given back to Venezuela. And then today, the president spoke about the drug trade in Venezuela, and rather than just going after the drug boats, maybe tackling things on land. Here's the president.
The drugs coming in by sea or by water is down 97%. Now we're also starting, that was the more difficult route. Now we're starting to do that by land also.
What does that mean, we're starting to do that by land?
Well, I think that's where the support that we were talking about in the past, where we have certain advisors that are going to be educating or at least working with the Venezuelan government. And of course, we also have the intelligence organizations had a lot of the connections with some of those militias within country. So I think that's really where we're pushing to. I still don't think that there'll be what we could say, large army or a big army stepping on into the lands of Venezuela. But I still think those advisors that's going to move things in. We have shut down a lot of the air, of course, and the maritime, but now it's that association with Venezuela, and are they going to step forward to work with the United States and press forward? There's already discussions about possibly opening up embassies or diplomatic relations with Venezuela even further. So I think they're going to have to pick up a brunt of these operations with us advising them.
How do you read into one of these seized tankers being returned?
Yeah, that's the interesting one. Now, the tankers were part of that ghost fleet, and we don't know if there's oil on board or not. That was one of the discussions. But the idea that this ghost fleet would then be handed to Venezuela, one of the things is getting those ships off the seas. They're not very safe. There's a lot of things going on with that. But it would be really interesting that Venezuela takes it. What will they do with it? But hopefully that doesn't do anything as far as illegal oil exports and stuff like they did before. But it is questioning, is there oil? What are they going to do with it? But maybe that's the first gesture that the U.S. is working closer with Venezuela rather than autonomously by ourselves.
All right, Glenn, thank you. Glenn Ignazio, as always, we appreciate it. 24 past the hour from Issues of World.